The following dialogue was taken from an article by Dr. Haunowski, founder of Sister Lucy Truth, and head of the Fatima investigation. Fatima Priest, written by Chris Ferrara, about Father Nicholas Gruner, acknowledged 20 years ago that a fake Sister Lucy was paraded before a cardinal, a bishop, and Carlos Evaristo. Also, the book states that her blood sister Caroline did not see Lucy face to face for 40 years. Why didn't Father Gruner call the cops? The book indicates that Carlos Evaristo worked for Father Gruner in 1992 when the famous interview with Sister Lucy took place. A follow-up interview took place a year later in 1993. The book acknowledges that Cardinal Ratzinger was the man truly in charge of access to her. Here is the relevant text from Fatima Priest by Francis Alban with Christopher Ferrara, Poundridge, New York, Good Counsel Publications, 1997, pages 151 to 153. Speaking about the October 11, 1992 meeting between the Cardinal, the Bishop, Carlos Evaristo, Mother Prioress of the Coimbra Carmel, and Sister Lucy, Fatima Priest states, "Enter the Oscar nominee performers, Mother Superior and Carlos Evaristo. Enter the woman, in a Carmelite habit who had the appearance of being Sister Lucy. The play begins. Sister Lucy will receive you," says an extern sister returning from making the arrangements. The doors open in the audience room. 2 Carmelites are waiting just inside. On the left stands Mother Prioress. The nun on the right was presented as Lucy dos Santos, the most famous nun of the 20th century. She turned 10 years old 7 months before the 1917 November Revolution in Russia. Now she is 85. Much shorter than was expected. Evaristo reported, "She wears the habit of the Carmelites which, amazingly, does not properly fit her." After initial instructions, the players move to an adjacent room where they sit down facing each other, with no grill between them, totally contrary to the customary rule adhered to for the past 400 years, both here, and at all Discalced Carmelite convents. The Cardinal and the Bishop were very nervous according to Evaristo. And well they should have been. Unable to speak Portuguese, they were unknowingly about to participate in a great work of fiction, the likes of which had never been heard in the whole history of Fatima. It would be entitled, 2 Hours with Sister Lucy, the pamphlet Evaristo would fabricate, claiming to be based on the interview with Sister Lucy. This performance that would follow the words about to be spoken, would starkly and cruelly suggest that Catholics, who grew up believing in Fatima, had been lied to at their mother's knee, and been victims of disinformation for 75 years. The book then implies that this interview, actually there were 2, one on October 11, 1992 and October 11, 1993, were unique events, and the real Sister Lucy was somehow still in the convent in Coimbra, but, for this interview, an impostor was put out. For 7.5 decades, this dear nun had been sheltered, shielded, protected by the Church. The text then indicates the person who was the gatekeeper to Sister Lucy during those years. There is a long list of bishops and cardinals all standing in line to say, "No to you," all apparently on behalf of the man, truly in charge of access to her, Cardinal Ratzinger. And, in spite of all that, the 2-hour interview about to take place occurs while this secluded nun, cloistered for all of her adult life, sits facing and holding hands with a man she has never laid eyes on before, who is neither cardinal nor bishop, but rather Carlos Evaristo, a minor employee of Father Gruner's apostolate who has chauffeured the dignitaries to Coimbra. Arguing that it was indeed Sister Lucy they saw, Evaristo said to Brother Francois de Marie d'Orange, "It was her. There is no doubt about it. I touched her face. I embraced her." A Carmelite whom mere bishops and archbishops cannot approach without Cardinal Ratzinger's approval. She was not able to see her own blood sister Caroline for over 40 years except through the grill, and then only when surrounded by half the community. Embraced by a stranger. When Brother Francois challenged him, "You have no decisive proof that you were in the presence of Sister Lucy." Evaristo made the astounding reply, "She was sitting in front of me. She held my hand like this for 2 hours." For any cloistered nun to hold hands with a stranger for 2 hours is a curious business. For this particular cloistered nun, it is unimaginable. The authors, Francis Alban and Chris Ferrara, with the obvious approval of Father Nicholas Gruner, the book also bears a foreword by Father Malachi Martin, draw the following conclusions concerning this meeting. The Evaristo pamphlet presents a new Sister Lucy who serves as the pathetic ventriloquist's dummy of the anti-Fatima forces, obediently repudiating everything Sister Lucy of Fatima had said before. The pamphlet is a veritable cavalcade of capitulation in which the new Sister Lucy finds a way to consign to oblivion what the old Sister Lucy had told the entire world. A final comment from Dr. Haunowski, head of the Fatima investigation at Sister Lucy Truth. And now what? Look into the fact that an imposter Sister Lucy was being put before the public and ecclesiastics as the real one, all the while changing the Fatima message 180 degrees. Did the Fatima Center attempt to find out where the real Sister Lucy was, or determine what happened to her? No, they never did this. They seemed to have dropped the issue completely. Wouldn't it matter? Could not the millions of dollars raised be used to launch an investigation into the fraud that was being perpetrated? Would not discovering the answer to this apparent crime make clear so much of what was happening with regard to the Catholic Church and the Fatima message itself, even with regard to the consecration of Russia? Did you spend 1/3 of a century begging the consecration of Russia from those who had disappeared Sister Lucy dos Santos, the remaining seer of Fatima and the messenger of Our Lady? The one who had our Lord, Our Lady, Saint Joseph, the Holy Trinity appear to her and entrust to her the message that was meant to save the modern world, having the greatest public miracle since the resurrection, seen by 70,000 people, as the divine seal of approval. Why did you turn away in indifference to a fact you clearly recognized, 20 years before Father Gruner's death? Why not call out the perpetrators? Why was this not a central focus of the Fatima apostolate? Update. Even Carlos Evaristo seems to appreciate the imposture when he sees it by indicating that Sister Lucy was shorter than he expected. Also, question, Evaristo indicates that Sister Lucy's Carmelite habit was ill-fitting. Is this some indication that the impostor was not even a real Carmelite but only an actress posing as a Carmelite? We don't know at all, but the fact of an ill-fitting habit, which was so ill-fitting that it even struck Evaristo, is interesting. I have no answers to the above questions yet. However, we at Sister Lucy Truth will not let this go until we find out the full truth and achieve justice. Promise. God wills it. Sister Lucy Truth and the Fraud of the Centuries, Uncovered. In 2017, Dr. Peter Haunowski, after spending several years puzzling over the dissimilarity between photos of the early Sister Lucy and the Sister Lucy of 1967 and beyond, founded Sister Lucy Truth, an organization dedicated to a complete identification of Sister Lucy of Fatima.
This project is a scientific attempt to determine whether there was a substitute who replaced a murdered or disappeared Sister Lucy of Fatima. After over 2 years of submitting all of the relevant photographic, video, and handwriting evidence to experts at the top of their professions, the conclusion has been a decisive one. Sister Lucy II from 1967 to 2005 is an imposter.
The religious fraud of the centuries is now glaring in the face of an unknowing world. The facts point to one conclusion: Sister Lucy of Fatima, the seer of the Virgin, was eliminated after 1958, and another woman was put in her place to act from then on as Sister Lucy of Fatima.
Who were the dark forces that brought this crime about? Who will investigate what happened to the real Sister Lucy? Who was this woman who was put in her place? What were the intrigues in church and state which required that Sister Lucy dos Santos, the sole surviving seer of the apparitions of Fatima, disappear forever and be replaced by one who would not interfere with the agenda of the highest officials in the Vatican?
This calls for a movie to break the story to a world that will soon, in the cinema, hear about the story of Fatima again. It is, however, a story more fascinating and terrifying than anyone could ever have guessed.